And we have a short presentation to get everyone acclimated to what Food, Bev, and Biz is all about for this year. But the focus of today is actually going to be letting our MBA 2s speak for themselves about the varied pieces of the food industry and how Ross can connect you. So we have a great panel for you today. The three of us are joined by Mo Watkins, Troy Martins, Colleen Sane, and Nikki Yochim. And we were excited to have this panel because we felt that it brought together so many diverse perspectives in the food industry. And what you will learn going through the Food Bev Club and going through your own recruiting journey is that saying, I want to go into food is like the broadest statement humanly possible, because there's just so many different ways that you can make an impact and different ways that Ross can make that happen. So we're excited for you to hear a little bit more from our own perspectives. But without further ado, I will jump right into the deck. Let me know when you guys can see the screen that I'm sharing. All right, I see some thumbs up, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. If I can figure out, there it is. So today's agenda, we're going to go through just the mission and purpose of what the Food Bev Club stands for on campus. We're going to take you through a section on career opportunities. And like I said, it's going to be very diverse, so hopefully you can take something new from that. We're then going to get into leadership opportunities. I'm sure you've seen in newsletters, we've sent out some director positions, and we strongly encourage anybody who has interest in this space to apply, because we're not tied to CDO. We're not tied to any other events. It really is just what the MBA 2 leadership team, me, Jane, Katie, and others, it's really just whatever content we feel would be the most helpful for everyone. So as Katie said, we're always looking for feedback. I believe she posted a survey in the chat. Katie, is that true? Is that what you posted?
I just posted my email in the chat for folks to reach out, but we can also, yeah, I think we also sent along a survey initially, but can also, if there's interest for it, send along a specific recruiting survey at a later date if people are interested in that.
Yeah, yep, and you'll see like Katie volunteering her email address, like that's what we're here for. We are here to support you guys because many different directions you can take food and so many different things to learn, and we'd love to be influenced by what you guys want just as much as we want to, talk about what we're interested in. And then we'll get into our events overview, but we'll breeze through everything to spend as much time as possible on the career panel. So the mission of the Food, Bev, and Biz Club is to essentially do three things. It's to support everyone that are seeking careers in food, beverage, and agriculture industries. It is to educate the broader Ross community on the business behind food and beverage. And it's to foster a community of students interested and passionate about this space. The reason we think these three are so important is because Food Bev kind of occupies this middling niche among clubs. It's not quite something like marketing club or a totally strictly professional club. And it's not quite something like a gourmet club where it's really just about community and enjoying food. We want to occupy a space in the middle because that's where our members are coming from. And the survey that we sent out a few weeks ago indicates that that's exactly what members are looking for. We have so many different diverse interests from education, community, and within those topics like sustainability or full understanding of food supply chains. And our goal is to provide you with everything. You'll interact with us through these events, through recruiting, social or educational events, and through monthly newsletters. And I'll pass it off to Jane to talk about the different career options within food and beverage and how Ross can help.
Awesome. So we'll go through this pretty quickly because obviously a lot of the careers we hope to hear from our panelists. But Food, Bev, and Biz really came to be because we felt like there was a gap, or rather the founders felt like there was a gap between the food companies that were coming to campus, really recruiting for brand, with interest from students across the entire food value chain and other functions. So that's really what our club is trying to do, is expose students who are interested in the food and ag industry opportunities throughout different companies, organizations, functions, etc. So this is just a snapshot of all the different types of food companies that Ross MBAs have gone into. So you can see your standard kind of CPGs, but then there's also some other brands in there, wineries and ag companies as well. And obviously we're trying to build out this network of Ross folks who have gone into food. So hoping to create that community while we're here for these 2 years. Go into the next slide. Again, just capturing that there's a lot of interest within Ross students in food and ag. And so even just from the past year graduates, roughly 30 went into food and bev jobs. Same amount of people who have interned in the space. And then also there's companies coming to campus, but especially with this COVID environment, one of the upsides is then getting access to companies that normally might not be able to recruit on campus. And so having a lot more exposure and access to those types of roles as well. And then if you go on to the next slide. So again, kind of traditional food companies that recruit for MBA programs are those CPGs, which we are happy to connect you with as well, but then looking into beverage companies, but then also more into the retail space and also into more niche off-campus opportunities. So we have some speakers who've interned at these different companies, but just trying to help you understand that within food and bev, if you're just interested in the industry, but don't really know which function fits you best or where you can have the most impact, hopefully you can come to us and try to help explore those different opportunities. So we've had MBA 2s and also alum who have gone into more ag-focused roles, VC roles, whether it's like finance, supply chain, et cetera. And then also obviously with tech being a growing aspect of the entire business world, there's a lot of food tech as well. And again, just capturing different functions available within food, ag, and bev. So just a snapshot of the different brands who typically come to campus and where alumni have gone, and just trying to highlight that even like, if you look at strategy and consulting, Cargill obviously has a good relationship with Ross and recruits here, but if you're interested in like traditional MBA consulting or like post MBA jobs, those can still have a food and ag focus. So there are folks who are going to McKinsey focusing on ag consulting as well.
Thank you, Jane.
Steve, I think you're talking about this. Cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and we could do this together, just introduce ourselves as your Food Bev leadership team. We had a brief introduction before, but I think those of us who are on the line can just talk about where we were at before Ross, what brought us to Ross, maybe our summer internship, and what we are going to do in the future. So I'm Steve, and I know a lot of you guys may know me from Marketing Club as well. Before Ross, I was in human capital consulting, and I had a food blog on the side in Chicago, and I decided like there must be some way where I could combine my interests in people, analytics, business with my interest in food. And getting an MBA, becoming a brand manager was just the right fit for me. And I knew I wanted to end up in a place that had a very food-focused culture. And to me, Conagra Brands was a great fit. So I entered there this summer, and I actually just signed the papers 2 days ago to be going back full-time. Oh, Celia, I saw the clap there. That's remember that Celia is coming from Conagra as well, just a different part of the company. So I'm excited to get to know a little bit more. Katie, are you still on?
Yep, I can give a quick intro. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie. I was at Deloitte Consulting, so rare, so brave, I know, so uncommon for the last 4 years before business school. And I'm also an herber, so go herb. I see a lot of you guys in the video screen, and have 2 summer internships. So spent my first one at Cliff Bar and Company, which was awesome. Really loved it. Kind of helped be able to bridge my interest in food and as well as my interest in sustainability. And then this summer, am looking towards more traditional, larger CPG companies still involving food, but looking to get that kind of more traditional training. So yeah, a lot of you have already talked to me about off campus, but still happy to talk to any of the remaining few who I haven't chatted with.
All right, and not to sound like a broken record, but I also came from consulting. I was previously at Accenture for 5 years, and then came to school to move more into the food industry because a lot of my consulting work was with the USDA, but I felt like it was very much on the periphery and I wanted to be more in the industry, more in a decision-making role. So this summer I was at General Mills in brand management and will be going back there full time.
Awesome.
And then I think, are Megan and Nate on?
I was going to say, I don't believe so. Jane, were you going to introduce Megan and Nate vicariously? I don't know the right word.
I was going to, but you can.
Okay. Megan Urchel is coming from Deloitte as well. So I think I'm sensing a theme here. But she and I recruited heavily for brand management roles last year, and she interned at Tyson. This year, she is on the marketing club education team with me. And I have to check in with her about what her MBA, her post MBA plans are. I think she's still working through them. And then Nate Zimeth and I, the three of us, Megan, Nate, and I were all in the same fact group last year for brand management. So he transitioned from finance to marketing. So he spent the summer at Molson Coors, and I'm like 99% sure he's going back, but I don't want to like be blamed if I'm wrong. Jane, did you want to add anything?
Nope, that's great.
Cool. Well, maybe you can help talk about the first two director roles that we have open.
Yes, so we posted these a while ago, but we just wanted to take the chance while we're on the call to highlight that we have a few director roles open. So director roles for community and partnerships would be working with me to help plan social events. And a lot of that is also focusing on working with different clubs within Ross. So we've talked with like SBF, EBC, we previously hosted events with, and just a few others as well. And then something that will be a bit more challenging this year that we typically have done has also been working with companies across Ann Arbor to see if we could do tours of their facilities and just talk with different founders about how they've gotten into the industry. But the plus side is that now this year we're able to do more joint school events. So we're in a network with the other top MBA programs and their food and ag clubs. So we have the opportunity to do some cool cross MBA programming. So that director role would help with that as well.
I'm so sorry for like polluting the screen here. But
And then director of recruiting, this one would be working with Katie. So really looking at some of the on and off campus events and just trying to figure out from a club membership perspective, how we can best assist people from a recruiting standpoint and just trying to explore the different job opportunities that are available.
The remaining two positions are education and Trex. Sorry, Jane, did I cut you off?
You're good.
Okay. The next two positions, education and Trex. So this will be helping to plan the occasional trend talk, which is an event that we frequently do. We'll talk a little bit more in a few slides, and an annual trek. So our annual trek last year was really fun. It was something that I helped organize as I was the director of education and Trex. And it took a theme of farm to table, and we expanded it and brought people along this kind of farm to restaurant to grocery store journey, highlighting Michigan produce. So if you're into event planning or education, this is going to be a great role for you to learn more. And we felt like this position was more applicable last year, the director of finance. Given everything is virtual, we have fewer expenses. but we still like having a diversity of opinions, and we wanted to make sure that people had as many opportunities as they could to contribute to the club. So even if the director of finance isn't doing as much this year, there's still plenty of ways that we collaborate as a group where that position can have a big impact outside of the strict delineation there. So we extended applications to October 11th. If you like what you see today and decide that you want to become more involved, we highly recommend that you apply. And we'll be reading everything over the next week and finalizing those positions by the 15th. Events. So this is where you can expect to be interacting with the group the most. Jane, do you want to talk through some social events that you have in mind?
Sure. So we're trying to find the right balance of virtual and in-person events, but really the focus for social is just to create more of a community amongst the raw students who are interested in food and ag. So some of those might just be informal hangouts, and then still trying to see, like, can we get together outdoors to do some partnerships with like the meadery or different breweries in town.
Cool. Again, like if you were a part of Taste of Ross, like that's an example of the ways that we collaborate with other clubs and provide some of the more community and team building activities out there. As I mentioned earlier, we have basically two types of educational events. We have Trend Talks, which are informal discussions about industry hot topics. And you'll actually have a chance to participate in your first Trend Talk in a few weeks. We'll get to that in a second. And as well as alumni guest webcasts. Jane mentioned earlier that we were able to do fewer in-person meetings, but hopefully COVID is giving us a chance to get people on the line that we might not have reached out to in the past. So we're cooking up some good alumni guest webcasts for you as well. In terms of recruiting, an event like today is going to help you give background to the different recruiting paths out there. We'll have office hours and interview preparation sessions because the off-campus world of applying to food and bev companies looks a little different from somebody who might be pursuing something in finance, consulting, or marketing. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have a Trek, which is a full day event based on a theme, which will take place in Winter A. The Trek that we had last year, as I mentioned, farm to table, was a way that we were able to go straight from agriculture to the restaurant industry and even the packaged goods industry. So it was a full day event last year in February where we toured the Michigan Farm. It's a student-run cooperative that grows a bunch of different crops that they supply to the University of Michigan dining. We then took a bus to Marrow Restaurant and had a 3-course lunch of all locally sourced produce and proteins. It was delicious, and while we were eating, we had the chef step out and talk about her perspective on the need to be sustainable in her craft. Finally, we concluded the tour with the Brinery, which is a local Ann Arbor company. They make craft fermented foods such as kimchi and sauerkraut. And it was just helpful to hear how their operation started with local produce and ended with local distribution. Upcoming events this fall. So Fall A is kind of in the rear view, but we did get a chance to start out with a farmer's market tour with the Taste of Ross event. And our first Trend Talk is going to be Friday, October 18th. I actually might have that date wrong. It might actually be Sunday the 18th. Yeah, that is Sunday the 18th. But the content remains the same. So Katie Cameron, who's an MBA 2, interned with PepsiCo, and she was at a Gatorade plant in Dallas, Texas. And the objective was to reduce water consumption because PepsiCo has pretty aggressive sustainability goals over the next 10 years. And so her and her partner from Tauber were able to outline ways that PepsiCo could achieve those goals. And Katie's walking us through the importance of water sustainability and talking through how her summer internship connected the dots. There will be other trend talks, but that is our first one. So I strongly encourage you guys to find it on campus groups. And upcoming,
will all those trend talks be recorded?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's basically the norm these days. Trend talks, pretty much everything else is going to be recorded. So, which is good. But those trend talks will also have part presentation, part Q&A, part group discussion, pretty casual, pretty informal. So we're hoping people can attend and bring their ideas. To be determined is upcoming recruiting events, office hours as recruiting picks up, or you need off-campus advice, or more social, like holiday-themed community events. So those are in the works, but not on the calendars yet. I'll pause right there and ask if anyone has questions before we move on to the career panel. Any expectations of the club that you'd like us to review? Jane, can you see like a chat or hand raising?
I don't see anything coming through. Yeah.
Okay.
You're good. I think we can do the panel.
Cool. All right, let's just get right into it. Our panelists for today, like I've said, come from such a wide variety of backgrounds and have such interesting places in the food, bev, and agriculture industries. So I'm really excited you'll get to hear from all of them. Their names, roles, and companies are pictured here, but I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves in the order in which they appear. So Troy, floor is yours. Do you want to describe your background, summer internship, and future plans?
Sure, yeah. So before Ross, I worked in private equity. So in an investing role, there was no, food and ag focus or anything like that. Came to Ross because I was interested in food and ag investing. This past summer, Internet Lewis and Clark Agri-Food, which is a late stage food and ag focused venture capital fund. The post-Ross plans are still being determined, but if I have it my way, it'll look very similar to what I did this summer.
Awesome. Colleen?
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to see a lot of familiar faces on here. I am a second-year herber, and I was a software engineer before school. And then, now I'm in the dual degree program with the environment school, and I had a really great internship with Farm Shelf. They're a hydroponics bookshelf where you can grow your own herbs and greens at home. And they launched the home version after the business version this summer. So it was super exciting time to be there.
Cool. I guess I'm next. Hey, everybody, Mo Watkins here. Before Ross, I was in Chicagoland area working for AbbVie, which is a biopharma company, actually working in corporate finance. So I did that for 4 years before Ross. Realized corporate finance was not my jam necessarily. So definitely came here to look to pivot into marketing. And I would say successfully was able to do so. As you can see, I had an internship with PepsiCo this summer and specifically worked on the Gatorade brand and seeing how I could help them grow some of their summer promotion activities there. So that was my summer, and I've also signed my full-time offer to go back there and would likely be back on the Gatorade brand upon graduation.
And I'll just skip over myself since I've already introduced myself and just pass it to Nikki.
Alrighty. Hey guys, Nikki Yoakum. I am an MBA too. Prior to Ross, I was at Deloitte for about 4 years, doing mostly work in the supply chain analytics space, but a lot of that work was in more the heavy manufacturing aviation space. So I knew I wanted to pivot to an area that I was a little bit more passionate about, which was sustainable food systems. So worked this summer, and I also wanted to get the experience of working at a startup. So that's a lot of the off-campus recruiting stuff that you've kind of heard about. So I spent my summer at a company called Spoiler Alert, which is a Boston-based supply chain software company that mainly works with large food manufacturers. So honestly, a lot of the brand names that you saw on a couple slides previous, and helps them divert a lot of their excess inventory to either secondary markets or to donation instead of putting it in the trash, basically. So my role with them was on the customer success team. So working with a lot of those food manufacturers and helping them understand a lot of the new data they were collecting and ways to make that experience more meaningful, which was awesome. I'm actually still working for them right now through the fall. It's a really great team. I am, however, going back to Deloitte, but looking to pivot. Actually, the founders of the company I worked with were previous Deloitters too that were connected in the food sustainable food system space at Deloitte. So looking to at least take advantage of the sponsorship, but in an area that I'm a little bit more passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. First question, and we'll continue to go in the same order, and midway through we'll flip it. So what makes you the most passionate about food? Why did you choose food and beverage as a career?
For me, I guess it's fairly personal. I'm a vegetarian, and so for the last 8 years or so, just something that I care about, I guess. And so got to a point where I was thinking about business school and thinking, what I really wanted to do, kind of lining up my skills and experiences with, what I actually care about. So it was taking my investing background and, moving forward with that, but trying to apply it towards food and ag. And so, again, I was in the private equity space, so that was like more mature type companies. I think food and ag, it's a gigantic kind of be disrupted in any way, shape, or form. And so just to see what's going on at the startup level was something that was really appealing to me. And so, again, that was part of the shift to get into business school and some of the stuff that I worked on this past summer, which was a great experience.
For me, my main goal of coming back to grad school was figuring out how do we deal with this problem of climate change and really drawing down carbon emissions. And when I was doing my own exploration of, okay, what are the biggest factors to these greenhouse gas emissions, I discovered that food has a huge impact on the amount of energy we use and wasted resources. And so I've been starting to explore that food area, and it just really clicked for me. I've been a vegetarian or a pescatarian for a decade, and I've read a lot about the topic, so it just made sense to go in this direction. And it's been so great being at Ross and being able to explore a bunch of different parts of the supply chain through MAP or internship, and getting a better idea of, okay, what's actually going on and what are some of the solutions that people are working on. So yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say my reasoning was probably kind of twofold, right? So the first one really just being, as I was looking to pivot into marketing, I specifically wanted to look at something that was going to be really consumer facing. And that was one of the things that I felt like I was lacking being in corporate finance. So, just so much like in Excel and everything, like I didn't really see the work that I was doing translating to the end consumer. So like when I thought about like, what is something that people interact with every day, food and bev, top of mind, and really thinking about like those interactions that they have with food and beverage, like then incites so many different feelings and emotions. And so I really wanted to be a part of that. And I know me specifically, I was looking for like a specific niche within food and bev. And that specifically was sports. And so when I thought even further into that, like Gatorade was really a true dream come true, because like as an athlete, whether it was like when I was really little playing soccer, and even in college when I was running track and field, like Gatorade was always there. So like just the emotions that brought up for me was like really special. And so as I thought about my career and what impact I want to have on the end consumer, being in food and bev was kind of a no-brainer. And then looking more specifically, like why PepsiCo specifically, I also wanted to pair that with a company that was highly regarded within the marketing space, especially because I was so new to marketing. So PepsiCo, as well as their culture, just like really fit for the company that I wanted to work with, and putting all that together really kind of just curtailed and detailed the experience that I wanted.
And then for me, I grew up in Boulder, which is like a very well-known place to be very crunchy and granola. And so a lot of people there from the onset were very interested in like natural foods and whatnot. But I also struggled a little bit because Boulder is just like a very homogenous, affluent place. And so it was just very clear like who has knowledge and access to these types of foods. And then when I was in consulting, I worked a lot with Food and Nutrition Service. And so they run the food stamp program, better known as SNAP. And so a lot of my work was running analytics and trying to figure out from like a policy standpoint how to improve the integrity of the food stamp program. And so through that was more interested in improving access to food and also better understanding how, like, from a health standpoint, how processed foods have really destroyed our lives and environment. So came to school to try to be part of the industry to solve that problem.
Gatorade bottles.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like half of you guys on the call have probably heard my story. But for me going into the food space, part of it was honestly coming from a supply chain background, and some of the pro bono work I'd done at Deloitte was working with a food bank distribution center and just seeing the imbalance between being at like the very tip of the connection to people who are food insecure, but also at the same time seeing so much food go to waste. It just seemed it was a huge supply chain problem to solve. And that being my background, wanted to get into an area where I could be solving such a huge problem that is, as Colleen mentioned, so related to climate change and a lot of things that we're experiencing there. So, I mean, I said sustainable, I think multiple times during my intro, and Spoiler at its core is a food waste prevention company. So trying to use some of the areas of my background in an area that was really interesting and impactful was how I came to this area.
Awesome. Let's do a snake draft type of deal. So Nikki, we'll start with you this time around. I want to hear about your internship. So describe your favorite moment and biggest challenge.
Sure. So I was employee number 12, I think, at Spoiler Alert, so which was pretty exciting. We're now up to 14. But I think what made that so exciting in general was I was a part really of everything. Even though I was on the customer success side, I got to see a lot of different facets of the business. I think especially this summer, working with a lot of these larger companies, Spoiler actually gained a ton of traction because of COVID, with a lot of the differences in demand that a lot of these food manufacturers were seeing. Everyone bought out everything in a panic at the beginning of the pandemic. And so they had like no excess inventory, and then they made a bunch, but everyone already had their stock. So there was just a lot of fluctuations. So they got to turn to a software program like Spoiler to help them manage that. So just seeing a startup company at a really exciting time of growth for them, and them trying to manage it and seeing kind of both the sales side where they're putting on a very excited and competent front, and they are very competent, but then on the backside kind of scrambling, just being a little bit more scrappy. I think they even asked me how I was scrappy in my interview, but on the backside of like trying to keep up with that was something that was really exciting. I think on that kind of as well, from like the other side of working at a startup, I mean, you do have to be a little scrappy. They don't have all the processes set up. You're kind of paving your own path, which I think was both a positive and a negative for me, trying to help establish some of these processes and systems, but you're also like kind of just thrown into the deep end really quickly. Again, I see it as both a positive and negative, but was something that at the beginning I realized, since it wasn't a traditional internship that was like very structured, it was something that I had to be cognizant about managing from the beginning.
And then I'm assuming I'm answering the same question, but I think the biggest challenge with my summer internship just during COVID times, it was supposed to be 10 weeks and it was shortened down to 6. And I feel like the scope wasn't really adjusted. So in 6 weeks, we still had to come up with like tactical recommendations on how to grow margins for the business. I was on Cascadian Farm. So that involved looking at the entire supply chain and figuring out how we could cut down on costs, but then also looking more to the customer side and the consumer side and figuring out how we could raise revenues. And so for me, that involved like both learning how the ins and outs of the company worked and like the history of the brand. And also then learning to use a lot of tools on my own. So like Nielsen had never touched it before, didn't know what any of the metrics meant. And then also learned to use Tableau to visualize a lot of the data. And then going back to like why I even got into food in the first place, because part of my summer project was to cut costs, like just solely based on the data, there were definitely some things I could have done that like, yeah, like this is an easy way to cut costs, but then pulling myself out of that and like realizing like sticking true to my own values and then also the values of the business and what's best for the consumer, realizing that like just following the numbers and the data is not necessarily the right way. And so it does take that like the grounding in my own beliefs and the values of the company to figure out what is the right way forward.
Cool. I would say, I think, as I mentioned in my intro, what I was working on this summer, being on the Gatorade brand, I specifically was working with, so Gatorade runs a huge like summer promotion, within regions, but also nationally, because summer is really where they make most of their sales. So about 40% of Gatorade's sales, or at least for like the original flavors, but across Gatorade in general, about 40% comes between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So they really try to focus on the sales there. And one of the ways is through the summer promotion. So my task was really to look at how they can better optimize those practices, get into more channels, and obviously increase sales. That's always the goal year over year, and really capitalize on that important time. So that was really cool to work on. I think one of the coolest parts of my summer internship was actually, I guess, kind of a one-off thing, but I was chosen to be like one of 8 interns to be able to sit down with the global chief commercial officer for PepsiCo. And that was really cool just to kind of see, you know, someone at that level of the company really have like an intimate conversation with them, but also just to see like, what are the thoughts that they're having about, you know, the future of the company. And then also be able to, you know, as someone that they see as being a future leader, like be able to give some input. So I thought that was really a really awesome opportunity, and just kind of be able to get some insight as to how they're thinking as a top person in the company. And I think one of the challenges for me was, I mean, it's kind of twofold. So one of the things, like I know Steve made the joke earlier, but it's really like, you know, Pepsi, yes, has a ton of great brands that people know and are really attached to. But on the other hand, you have to think about like what some of those brands mean and like what it does to some of our health. So, you know, drinking soda every day and some of the, you know, like consuming some of these packaged goods every day aren't necessarily the best for you. So really like having to balance that, I think is tough at times for sure. I think the other tough thing for me personally was, you know, as I've pivoted into marketing, it's like, I also had my internship cut down from 10 to 6 weeks. So really trying to figure out what the heck marketing was, as well as like focus on my project all in that short amount of time, doing it virtually, et cetera, et cetera. I think that was really challenging as well. But ultimately it ended up being an incredible summer. So I have no complaints on my
end. For me, it was so great to be at a startup that was really at an inflection point, moving from this, you know, validated version of the farm shelf in businesses, and, you know, the catalyst of COVID, you know, moving us to you know, an at-home client product. So really exciting to be there for growth. And my favorite moment was launching the MVP, the first phase of the MVP for the app that users would work with. So actually being able to see the status of, okay, when do I actually, you know, germinate and transplant my seedlings? And so that was really exciting. The biggest challenge was like, I've never actually seen a farm shelf, you know, it's about the size of a refrigerator. They can't really ship it to me. So that was definitely a bummer, is not being able to interact with it and see how things work.
For me, I mean, the internship itself was great. The day of evaluating, you know, potentially investing in food and ag startups was really interesting work. for me, like my bigger internship project, I did a deep dive on the controlled environment agriculture space. So things like vertical farming and greenhouse growing. So when you take a deep dive on stuff that you're like actually interested in, it like feels pretty good to feel pretty smart about the research you just did. So that was really interesting. And a big drawback for some of these growers. So again, as we talk about like this really big and kind of old industry of food and ag, you know, this is like part of that disruption that's starting to happen. And for some of those growers, they've never proven like to their investors that they can either be acquired by someone or, you know, be publicly traded so the investors can get the return on their investment. A company called App Harvest just in the last week announced that they are going to go public. So that's, you know, really exciting. They're kind of the first one to do that. And I think the dominoes are going to start falling. So I think that's really interesting. For me, obviously COVID related, my internship was still in person actually, which was kind of weird, but I guess in hindsight, I'm glad it worked out that way. It was cut down from 12 to 10 weeks, so it wasn't a big deal. Venture capital it's a pretty high touch industry. So it's all about who you know. You're trying to meet with every company kind of in your pipeline. And so certainly there was no travel going on. We actually ended up investing in a company this summer that was based out of Canada. So like we definitely couldn't go visit them if we wanted to. There's tech focus here, obviously. So you want to get kind of product demos similar to kind of what Colleen was explaining. Obviously that's a little bit more hardware, but so you kind of lose some of that, which was a little bit of a bummer, but you know, all in all, it was a really good summer.
Awesome. I want to take a quick pause and poll the audience, see if they have any questions for our panel. You can just shout them out if you have them.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Really anyone can answer, not necessarily directed to any of the one panelists, but I'd be curious about your use of influential leadership rather than positional power, just because in a lot of the situations as interns or coming in as associates, we would like to influence in that way, but we don't have the power to directly make big decisions.
Was the question more about how you lead without explicit authority and more implicit authority?
Absolutely. We're not coming in at director level typically, right? So managing that type of relationship.
Sure. Mo or Jane, I'll just start with you guys because I know the brand management role and I know how important leading without explicit authority is. So if one of you wants to talk about your experiences, go right ahead.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was going to get into. Because I mean, essentially what they give you is an ambiguous business problem that is actually something that they're dealing with. And I can't speak for everybody's project, but I know that that's kind of what mine was. And it's kind of like, here's the very brief information that we can provide and that, you know, we'll start you off with. And then it's kind of like off to the races where the rest of the summer is really just like this mystery and kind of a puzzle. And to be honest with you, like I mentioned before, like this is an actual business like issue or something that they've been trying to solve, and either they don't have the resources or they really just want to get a different point of view on it. So even though you are an intern or you're not coming in at director level, they really are kind of looking to you to be the expert in that sense, or to provide a new perspective. So because otherwise, you know, they wouldn't necessarily be bringing you in to do so. So like they are, I mean, at least at PepsiCo, and I'm sure many other companies, like they were entrusting me to do my due diligence and bring the best perspective that I could to the table. So I thought that was really empowering. And really after the first week of kind of being in my own head about not being the expert, I really just kind of dove all the way in. And after I really accepted like, hey, I'm going to really take onus over this project, you know, I started seeing a lot more results. And really at some point, like it clicks and you really start feeling like, you know, that stuff inside and out. And by the time you get to the end presentation, like you really are probably best suited to lead that project. And I know for me, at least, they took my entire deck and everything I collected and handed it to another MBA2 who actually happened to be a roster. And that's now what he's working on in his full-time role. So I think just kind of seeing that progression is really cool. And, they entrust you with that kind of leadership mindset.
Just echoing what Mo said a little bit. I mean, definitely come in with the mindset, exactly what he said, like you are there because they want your opinion and they want someone who's not been entrenched in the business for a while. So they want someone working on that project that they haven't been able to solve with their time. One of the other things I've found helpful too is once you start having some of these ideas, do a little bit of research, just whether it's talking to people about them, start bouncing those ideas. If you're in a data-driven role, see if you can find some data around it. I knew I had something around like anchoring around prices this summer that I assumed based on my fund marketing classes from MBA 1 year that like anchoring is a thing. So I like went and I looked at some of like, I figured it was probably something that was influencing decisions. So I went and I did a little bit of my own work before I even brought that forward so I had something that I could point to within their own system to back up what I was saying to see if it was something that was worth exploring more as well.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I've got a question here.
Go ahead, Kyle.
It's about the, not everybody here has 2 summers to search for internships, but I know that the 2 Urbers on the panel do, and I am also an Urber. So my question is about that and how you balance looking for roles at larger companies versus smaller companies. I'd also really love to hear Nikki's perspective, having worked at like a really small company. So I was at a very small nonprofit before this, and so I feel like, hey, that'd be really easier, or that'd be a good, way to leverage my skills at nonprofit to go into that. So yeah, question for Colleen, Jane, and Nikki is like, how do you balance looking for those 2 roles in the 2 summers that you have, or 2 types of companies in 2 summers you have?
Sure, I can start. So for me, I want to have 2 very different internships. Like, with Herb especially, it's been more of an exploration period to figure out and try things, see what I'm good at, see what I don't like so much. And so for my first internship, I did lean a lot more on my background and what I was comfortable with. So I'm hoping to lean in a different direction and be a little bit more uncomfortable coming up.
Yeah. I actually dropped herb, so that is something we can talk about a different time. But my perspective originally was that I would do something, like I didn't intend to take my first summer internship, but I ended up really liking it. So that's what I'll be doing full time. But my original perspective was like having done the big CPG and coming from a big company before Michigan, that next summer I would do something small and niche just to try that. Obviously now that's like maybe something I'll try longer term, but I was thinking of like large and small and like different parts of the food value chain.
I guess for me, looking for this summer, I kind of viewed, and I think I would probably do it even more if I was lucky enough to be an Herber. But my first summer, and even like, but for me, even just the fact of it being an internship, knowing that it was a little time boxed and it was a different type of experience, using that to take more of a risk. I knew what elements I liked about my old job and knew what I was looking for. So I think, I mean, I didn't even officially accept my job, I think, until it might have been early May, I don't know. It was a while. The like off-campus recruiting timeline really tests your patience and your risk tolerance a bit. But I knew that this summer I wanted to do something like pretty specific. I wanted to do a startup in the food waste space. Like there's not 100 of those out there, and they weren't people that were coming to campus. So just knowing that that was kind of the riskier version that I wanted to do an internship for and like at least try out that experience is something that I made sure I wanted to use my summer for. And again, just trying to take the elements that I liked and using that to try out something that I thought could be a fit and that I might always wonder about if I didn't try it out now. You're in a pretty risk-free situation as a student, so that was kind of my perspective.
Awesome. We have 6 minutes left, and I have one more question that I'd love to hear from the panel. So if you guys could email me, I'll put my email in the chat now with any questions. I'll make sure that our panel is also able to answer them offline. So that's my email. Feel free to reach out. Last question for the panel, and we'll start with Troy. When you think about the future of food, what's the most exciting thing for you or the most concerning?
The most exciting thing for me is on a little bit more of a theoretical angle, I guess, or like much longer term, but biomanufacturing. So we're starting to see it with like cell-based meat. You theoretically can grow anything in a lab. You can grow produce in a lab. So if we did that at scale, like if that's the norm, you know, all the land that frees up, you think again of just how expansive food and ag is today, how inefficient it is, its effect on climate change. If you, again, theoretically, if you grew everything in a lab, I think that's really, really interesting to think about. Again, we're a ways off from that, but that's fun for me to think about. I'll touch on the concerns as well. I mean, you know, the Malthusian crisis, the population grows much faster than the amount of land does. If anything, the amount of land we have is decreasing. You look at developing countries like China and India and their, you know, growing appetite for animal protein. That's, I think, the biggest piece of the value chain here, of just the inefficiency and its impact on climate change. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. There's a lot going on in the US, you know, with like plant-based proteins and a lot of that innovation, but it's not at the same place kind of in the more developing countries. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, similarly, we have all these, you know, huge problems that we're facing, you know, as Troy mentioned, like huge population growth, like not as much land to access, huge amount of food waste with, you know, we have solutions such as spoiler alert. So seeing how all these innovations can come together to solve multiple problems at the same time, I'm really interested in. One company I'm super excited about is Troy mentioned that these lab grown meats. There's like a mushroom grown meat called Meati, MEATI, and they use the roots of mushroom called mycelium to actually grow like mushroom meat. So that's one thing I'm super excited about.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll keep mine fairly brief, but I think I'm really excited about the future of like functional foods and beverages. So I know that was like a hot topic, at least in my role at PepsiCo, just understanding, well, I think just in general, the population has a better understanding of their health, and that's probably only going to continue going forward. So I think being able to have, you know, food and beverages that you enjoy, but have them also serve a functional use for you as a consumer as well, I think is really cool. Is going to be helpful for the population. I think the downside is, you know, with continued innovation and trying to put more things into the market, we also have to get the sustainability piece right. So I know there's plenty of herbers on here, and I'm sure you guys are well aware. But I mean, I think, you know, PepsiCo as a company, you know, with their packaging of things in the future of food and bev, like have to get it right. So otherwise, it's not really worthwhile to be doing that type of innovation. So I think PepsiCo specifically, with their water use and the way that they package some of their goods, at least in the US, probably could be better. So I think that's probably the biggest concern I have. And without getting that right, the future looks a little scary. So yeah.
Yeah, I think similar to Mo, I think the biggest concern is just the impact of food and ag on climate change. But I think what's exciting is that there's a lot of practices like regenerative ag that are not new, but are maybe new to being at scale. So there's companies like General Mills and Danone, and obviously a lot more on the ag side, who are starting to invest heavily in this space. And it's not perfect and it's not to the scale that we need. But I think with some of the bigger players starting to care more and put the money there, I think that's more promising.
Yeah, I think, I mean, similar to Jane, the fact that there are all of these large companies that are creating these, or at least saying that they're pledging to either go carbon neutral, they're doing some things to help with the sustainability. The fact that now I think the general population is more aware that this is a really scary and big problem. And it's putting enough pressure on these companies to take action on it, I think is something, I mean, it's the concerning part that got us there, but it's at least exciting that they are taking steps to address it in a way. And also just in general, I think there's been a ton of innovation in this space. Also pairing tech with food. In general, ag is, I think, more seen, maybe less so now, but more seen. It's an old industry. It's been around forever. And the fact that now there's a lot of innovation coming the way, whether it be with autonomous tractors in farming, some of the regenerative practices, and using some of even like data and AI to figure out the best way to manage a field in a most sustainable way. Spoiler alert being one. There's stuff at the end of the food chain. Appeal is another awesome company. If you want to check them out, even if they didn't offer me an internship, it's fine. But I think there's just a lot of fun innovation going around in this space. I think people are looking at things that used to be very separate with technology and food and bringing them together in some really exciting ways.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great note to end on with the future of food. Troy, Colleen, Nikki, Jane, Mo, I can't thank you guys enough for sharing your perspectives. Thank you so much for joining. And for everyone else, thank you so much for dedicating a part of your Friday afternoon to the FoodBev Club. You'll be hearing more from us about future events, and we hope to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.